Hello everyone and welcome to the 29th episode of Shaman's Way. We're excited that you've joined us. In this episode we're going to be discussing Frog, and Cricket is going to be sharing the story or an analysis of the story of the Princess and the Frog Prince, and then discuss Frog in general as it relates to some other cultures and such. We hope you do enjoy it. If you are looking to get to know Frog or any other power animal better as well, if you look at the show notes of this podcast, you'll find some links that might help you with lower world journeys and finding power animals. And without further ado, here is Cricket.
The frog's return moon on the medicine wheel is between April 20th and May 20th. The animal that is associated with the frog's return moon is the beaver. The mineral is chrysocolla, I believe, and I know there's a blue flower that is associated with that particular moon. But what I really wanted to talk about was frog. I, like probably many Canadian children, love the sound of frogs at night. I love the sound of crickets at night. I love the sound of crickets at night. And I used to really enjoy catching frogs as a kid. I enjoyed squealing when they jumped from my hands. I just liked the challenge of catching screaming, squirrely little and lovely little amphibians. I didn't grow up in tropical areas where frogs are two-handed to pick up. I didn't grow up with the stories of poisonous frogs or hallucinogenic frogs, but I did grow up with the story that you would get warts from frogs. Whether or not that's true, I don't know. I never got a wart that I could trace to a frog, even to this day. Frogs are such amazing creatures. From a scientific perspective, this is such a simplistic synopsis in simplicity, because your ability to research the wonderful attributes of the frog within the physical world are at your fingertips with any search engine. So a simplification is that the frogs are the canary in the coal mine with respect to the environment and the toxicity of the air. Frogs have the ability to move air through their skin. The more polluted that the air becomes, the more likely they are to die of skin rashes, skin cancers, to die of infections on their skin. And they have been foretelling the breakdown of the air around us for a long time, and have, like the bees, been declining in numbers for an alarming amount of time, but a very short amount of time. From a perspective of journey work, frogs are, for me, when I have them and have seen them or have had people in circle talk about their experiences with frog, I am reminded that they truly live in all the worlds, just like snakes do. They're mysterious, they're transformers, they're shapeshifters in different types of stories. They are male shapeshifters and female shapeshifters, which are interesting in and of itself. For me, they represent the mud and the cold and the fresh aspects of Earth. They represent the cool waters or the hot waters. They ship through that hypnotic ribbit sound, through the bold, boisterous sound of a huge bullfrog. There are many aspects of physical self that, for me, are represented within the frog. The ability to remain conscious and aware in the darkness is one of the attributes of the deep swimming frogs, such as the human being or the soul can remain active and alert within the depths and the darkness of the soul, or in the waters of psyche in the West on the medicine wheel. There are those aspects with regard to living between the worlds. There are frogs in trees. In trees, I'm going to talk about in another podcast, and talk about the 4 sacred aspects of the tree, but suffice to say that frogs have been living in trees and jumping from leaf to leaf gracefully and beautifully, and thank goodness for National Geographic and amazing photographers and amazing filmographers and videographers, that we can see the beauty of the frog and see the dynamic colors and shapes and variations in the frog, just the same as there are shapes and variations and vibrations and vibrancy within the human soul, within the human population. Frogs are, for me, they are an element of teaching me to leap forward, to leap from branch to branch and from leaf to leaf, when knowing that I could fall because that leaf that I might land on, that precipice idea that I might land on, that thought, might not be able to hold me. I might fall from that thought, that idea, that flimsiness, whatever that relationship is. Frog is that relationship to the wind and to the upper branches, but really, for me, I see frog more as that gutty aspect, that dirty aspect, that rich aspect of self. That is what I like to interpret or like to work with in respect to the frog. And I really, as you know, enjoy Joseph Campbell. And this is Joseph Campbell's interpretation of the princess and the frog prince. So the little girl has a golden ball. Now gold is the incorruptible metal. The sphere is the perfect sphere, and the circle is her soul. She likes to go out of the edge of the forest, the abyss, and sit beside a little pool, a little spring, the entrance to the underworld. And there she likes to toss her soul around, toss the little ball and catch it, toss the ball and catch it, toss the ball and ding! She misses it and goes down into the pond, and she starts to weep. She has lost her soul. This is depression. This is loss of energy and joy in life. Something has slipped out. It is the counterpart of Helen of Troy being stolen in the classic story of Iliad. Helen of Troy was stolen, so they went to get her back. So the little gold ball has dropped. Her soul has been swallowed by the wolf of the underworld. And now when the energy goes down like that, the power that's at the bottom of the pool, the inhabitant of the underworld, comes up. A dragon, or in this case, a little frog. And he says, "Well, what's the matter, little girl?" And she tells him, "I've lost my golden ball." And he says, "I'll get it for you." And she says, "That would be very nice." And he says, "What will you give me?" Now, this is Cricket speaking and not Joseph Campbell. When we make plans or play or bargains with water spirits, we have to be very careful. In the oldest tale of Sleeping Beauty that I could find, Sleeping Beauty was 10 fairies, not 7 as we are commonly known for. And the king and the queen, for whatever reason, they went to the well and they spoke to the water fairy and they asked the water fairy for a child. And we all know the rest of the story of that. But I think that it's interesting. They go to that well, to that abyss, to the giving of the soul. and a water fairy grants them. So here the frog, that shapeshifter, that is that element of water, that spirit of water. And we have to be careful because water can be super, super tricky. It can be super, super soothing, the amniotic fluid of the womb, the tanks of water that are now incredibly popular in common culture, the float tanks. Anyway, I could go on. But suffice to say that the frog is this mysterious story. There is something afoot. And we all know the story. We all know that there is a trick to it and someone else has been tricked. Otherwise, a prince wouldn't be a frog. Now I will go back to what Joseph Campbell was talking about. So the frog goes down and brings up the ball. Now he is the hero who is on the adventure. She, without so much as a thank you, takes the ball and goes trotting home. And he comes flopping after her saying, "Wait for me!" He's very slow. She gets home, and that evening, when the little princess and King Daddy and Queen Mother are having dinner, doing nicely with their meal, the green creature comes flopping up the front steps. Bloomp, bloomp, bloomp. The girl goes a bit pale, and the father asks, "So what's the matter? What's that?" And she says, "Oh, just a little frog." And she says, "Oh, just a little frog I met." And he says, "Did you make any promises?" See, already, that conscious aspect, this is Cricket speaking, that conscious aspect already knows the father figure, the magician figure in this story, so to speak, the king, knows already when he sees a frog that there's a shapeshifter and knows that there's a water spirit, and so the promises have to be made and kept. So we have a history, as Joseph Campbell is pointing out, with respect to the mysterious frog and the application of owing. Now there's a moral principle coming in. You have to correlate all these things. So when she answers, "Yes," the king says, "well then open the door and let him in." So in comes the frog. And he's down on the floor, and he says, "I want to be on..." Well, that spoils the dinner. The dinner is finished, and she goes up to bed, and he comes flopping up the stairs after her, and bangs against the door. I can kind of imagine he goes ploop, 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 bouncing against the door, and we can all kind of think of what that sound of a frog, slimy and green and large enough to have a voice to be heard, hitting against a wall. I think our imaginations can run with that one. "I want to come in." So she opens the door and she lets him in. "I want to sleep in bed with you." Well, that is more than she can take. There are several ways of ending this part of the story, but the one I like best is where she just picks up the frog and throws him against the wall, and the frog cracks open and steps out this beautiful prince with eyelashes like a camel. And it seems he has also been in trouble. Hag into the condition of a frog. Now that's the little boy who hasn't dared to move on into adulthood, and she is the little girl who is on the brink of adulthood. Both of them are refusing it, but each now helps the other out of this dilemma, and it's a beautiful, beautiful experience. Then the story says the next morning, after they had been married, a coach comes to the front door. It was his coach. He was a prince, after all, whose kingdom had been in desolation since his transformation into the frog. So he and his bride get into the coach, and as they are driving away, they hear a loud sound. Bang! He says to the coachman, "What's the matter, Henry? What happened?" And Henry says, "Well, ever since you've been gone, my prince, there have been 4 bands of iron around my heart. One of them has now broken." And they ride further. One of them has now broken. And they ride further, and 3 more bangs. And then the heart of the coachman beats properly once again. The coachman is symbolic of the land that requires the prince as its generating and governing power. He failed his duty and gone into the underworld. But down in the underworld, he found his little pride. Now, Jung says that water is the commonest symbol for the unconscious. The lake in the valley is the unconscious in which it lies, as it were, underneath consciousness. So that it is often referred to as the subconscious, usually with the pejorative connotation of an inferior consciousness. Water is the valley spirit, the water dragon of Tao, whose nature resembles water, a yang and the yin. Therefore, water means spirit. That is the Western version, and I wanted to share the depth of the frog and the depth of the transformation, the depth of speaking, and I wanted to bring our attention to that. But now I want to share with you an entirely different story, and this is a Tibetan story, and it is a story, I'm not going to tell you the story, I'm just going to tell you about the story. But I would love to do the story. I'd love to video the story and put it up on YouTube, because it is really full of actions and it's much more fun to watch than just to listen to. However, the synopsis, the difference between the frog in Western is that the frog is often referred to, in some of the tales, she has to kiss the frog. And so this is that aspect of ourselves that has to kiss. So this is that aspect of ourselves that has to kiss that animalistic or that natural side or that unconscious side, that side that's ugly, and we have to kiss it. And we have to love what is reviled within us, or what we hold as yucky, or what we hold as not wanting to know. And in this story, in the Buddhist story, the story is a frog, and the frog is a shapeshifter, and the frog is the shaman. And it's not uncommon for animals to leave their skin and hang it upon the door and transform into their human and go about and do their activities, and then at night come back and zip into the frog skin or the bear skin or the beaver skin. So there are different stories, but the frog is a very common one, I think, because it has such malleable skin. The frog spies a beautiful princess and wants the beautiful princess. And the shopkeeper, he's a wealthy man, and he has he has much standing in his community, and his wife is portrayed as the typical shopkeeper's wife with a bitter tongue and, sallow. So here we have, the female part, that being that bitter part, that ungiven part. So we already know that we have a dispossessed mother in the story, the consciousness of the story. And we know that we have a proud father, the doer, the anima, or the animus within this story. So we have a representation of shrewdness and tightness and loss of innocence and self. So when something unrepresentative of human and lower than low comes to the shop and asks for the daughter, they obviously say no. And so then the frog throughout the story throws the four elements at them. He sets their place on fire. He floods it with his tears. He invites chaos into this world, into the shopkeeper's world. And it is that invitation of chaos that frog represents, because frog does represent transformation and change and movement. So in these stories, we have that symbolism of transformation and change, just like in the frog and the princess. That frog represents the alchemical shift, that change. By handing the soul back, frog has already indelibly imprinted transformation and change into the heart or into the soul of the princess. Whatever touches your soul remains with your soul. And in this story, the frog is the representation of the shaman's will and the shaman's might and the shaman's ability to shapeshift. And being given the form of a frog, we know that the culture venerates frog. We know that the culture believes that frog is far more than that filthy, dirty creature that lives in the water. and as such is attributed the elements, the control over the elements, much as the shaman would have control of the elements. There are many references to the killing of frogs as a means of making prayers for water to come, and using frogs in magical brew and in, the stories of witchcraft and the use of witchcraft. Anyway, I'm digressing. However, as the Tibetan story continues, the frog, the shaman, has many other qualities. The shaman is able to be a horse whisperer in this story. The shaman is able to woo and win over the beautiful feminine. So similar to the masculine and the feminine in the Jung story, this is a more mature masculine and feminine. This is a male aspect in the frog that represents that alchemal aspect of all of us, male or female, non-gender, binary gender, whatever aspect. Whatever we bring into ourselves allows us to transform. So this frog has already gone through much maturing and much wisdom and is now able to offer his gifts to somebody. And the young girl, as often is in tales, has a guardian, and the guardian is, a grandmother, and the guardian is a grandmother figure. And the story goes that the beautiful woman that has fallen in love with the eyes, and she recognizes the eyes. So we know now that the frog has these luminous black eyes, the eyes of the scrying mirror. If if we've talked before, if you're familiar with the scrying mirror, the ability to see self, the ability to see your soul reflected back within those eyes. And even though the being had shifted from the frog to a human being and back and forth, the soul itself, the eyes itself, have not shifted, have not changed. So the frog reminds us that no matter the outward transformations, the core and the aspect is constantly changing, but self is recognizable by all who are willing to see you, by all who are willing to look in your eyes, the eyes of the soul, the eyes of the heart, the eyes of the spirit, the eyes of all things. The frog, as the story progresses, the young lady that is so overcome by love and does not wish to lose the human form, throws the frog skin into the fire. And unlike the story of the first one, where, everything turns out very happily, the loss of a critical aspect of self has been sacrificed for love. So the love story is not written as a happily ever after. The love story is a chaos and a transformation and a shift. And the representation of frog representing that leap from one reality to the other reality, that, leap for love. There are so many traditions, and how many times have you heard and read on your Facebook or heard in other podcasts that love is the answer, love is the reason. But we have so many tales dedicated to that word, that monocular reality of individual love, and then that ever expansive multiverse relationship of love between us and that which extends beyond us. But we have a story here from the Buddhist perspective that talks about the illusions, the illusion of the frog, the illusion of the human, the illusion that the skin defines us, the illusion unasking an important part of her beloved, whom she swears to love. She takes what she knows nothing of, that shapeshifter skin, and throws it into the fire, the ultimate alchemist. fire, that ultimate shifter, that ultimate bringing about of change. One cannot step into the fire and not be changed, whether it's energetically or burnt physically. The frog represents many aspects of the psyche and many aspects of the soul. And it is, from my perspective, not often talked about, not often referred to in an understanding manner of the transformative relationship of a being that dwells between the worlds. Dwells between the worlds. Frogs have the knack for finding themselves in other situations. Another story with respect to the frog comes out of Russia, and it's in relationship to Baba Yaga. And Baba Yaga is the crone and the goddess of death. And she has a lot of very rich aspects. But in that story, there's, if you know the story of Valalisa, and if you don't know the story of Valalisa, maybe you'll get to see me tell it one day. However, in the story, Baba Yaga curses Valalisa and turns her into a frog. And as it happens to be, a king in another country has 3 sons. Here's that number 3 again. 3 sons that arch their bows, arrow lands, or whoever the arrow lands into, preferably a female gender in this binary story, then that is who the prince brings back, and the test be given to have a bridesmaid. And of course, the frog obviously outperforms the other 2 slow, daughter-in-laws that are coming forward, and this prince is so overwhelmed by what he sees when she shapeshifts into the beautiful princess and then has to shapeshift back into the frog. And so he is told by Baba Yaga that he has to go to find Koshki, the deathless one, and in order to win his love, he has to kill the deathless one. And of course he succeeds, so that just is a whole other story with respect to chaos. How do you kill death? But that's a paradox for another day and another story and another time. It's to say that releases Valalisa, who has been a prisoner of sorts on and off in different tales of Baba Yaga for many years, and she becomes that center voice, that center focus for the Russian folklore, for innocence, for trials, for tribulations, for strength, for finding ways of doing things that the witch says you can't, for inner resistance, for calling on spirits to help. Valalisa is an important part of Russian folklore. The frog is an important part of folklore. Depending on which culture you are in, often has a relationship to how you perceive that creature. I haven't invested much time in searching the Amazonian or the South American tales of the frog, but if I have a listener who speaks Spanish or who has stories like that, I would be very interested in reading them. But I imagine I would hear another story again with respect to frog, and probably a deeper one, probably a richer one, probably as a creator being, or a being that drank all of the water, or something like that. I don't know. When a frog appears in your journeys, I hope some of these thoughts come to mind, at least after. But I come back and I do offer you a remembrance. When a frog enters your journeys and offers to do something for you, never forget and always remember you're dealing with the land of the betwixt and the between, with the land of the betwixt and the between, and what has been given expects a return to be received. I wish you a lovely evening, a lovely day, a lovely morning. Thank you for your kind attention, and thank you for listening to these words. And I place my podcast voice back to Doug, and I wish you goodbye.
Thank you once again, everyone, for listening to this episode of Shaman's Way. If you are enjoying these episodes and you think others might too, it's a huge help if you like us on iTunes or whichever podcast device you might be listening to us on. It really helps us reach others who might enjoy them as much as you do. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you in a couple weeks.
Hey, hey, hey.